Since today we're talking about a book that's set in the South, I thought sweet tea would be appropriate. Hi, my name is Sarah Freshly, and welcome back to Freshly Read Books. So this week I am talking about all of the Booker shortlisted books on every day of the week. As a reminder, the schedule is as follows. Day 1, Day 2, Day 3, Day 4, Day 5, Day 6, and Day 7 is rankings and winner predictions. That's right, today we are going to be talking about The Trees by Percival Everett. While I would say that this book is deeply an American one, where it's very much set in the US and about something specific to our history, I think that the themes as a whole are something that anybody could learn from or gain insight from, and it's really an interesting book to see on this list. So before we get into that, let's talk about the synopsis. This takes place in Money, Mississippi, where there are a series of murders, and like really gruesome ones at that, where there's typically two bodies, but one of them appears over and over again, and he looks weirdly like Emmett Till. Emmett Till being, of course, the real life person who at the age of 14 was beaten up, lynched, his eye was gouged out, he was shot, he was wrapped in barbed wire by these men that were later completely acquitted by an all-white and all-male jury for supposedly like flirting with someone. When his body was found a few days later, I believe, his mother said that she wanted it to be an open casket funeral because she wanted people to have to face what was done to her son. This sparked a really important time for the civil rights movement and is still something that's taught about our history today. Of course, is Emmett Till the only one that had something like this happen to him? Absolutely not. But he provides this almost jumping off point for this story and the way that it's told. So we've got the two bodies, one of whom looks kind of like Emmett Till, and he is holding the balls, the testicles of the other man, the other dead man, and they have been removed from his body. Later, detectives realize that this is happening in other places in the country as well. It's not just in Money, Mississippi. But in Money, we do get these two detectives that are sent in that are of higher rank than the local police force. And the local police force is very unhappy about this because these two detectives, not only are they coming in from out of town, which I feel like is definitely a trope in those types of detective stories, but also they are black. So this is putting them more on edge because, I mean, honestly, like so much of this town is very racist and like blatantly so. Like the amount of things that they say that are just full out aggressions, not microaggressions, are insane. So in talking about those two detectives coming in from out of town and how it's kind of like this trope that the people there don't really like them, like that's intentional. There are a lot of tropes that are purposely played upon in this book, and it kind of harkens back to this like buddy cop era of TV shows, movies. I know technically those still come out, but I feel like it really had a heyday in a certain time, and the humor in this book, and there is a lot, is referencing back to that time of humor, or like that type of humor that was popular when buddy cop movie stories were at their height. I don't think that it really has the humor that is as popular in today's media, but instead it's almost making fun of, but also kind of paying homage to this other style of comedy. It does that with wordplay and even like a lot of slapstick humor. This means that you're not necessarily laughing with the characters, but at the characters. Almost in thinking that, oh, this is so silly, this is so reminiscent of these other things that I don't really find funny anymore, that it's funny how much this book is portraying that, if that makes sense. Now, you may be confused if you haven't read this book yet, because so far you've heard me talk about Emmett Till and how funny this book is, which might leave you to wonder, what exactly is the tone of this book? Like, is it a really serious thing or is it lighthearted? And yes to both. This book walks this fine line. Actually, you know what? No, it doesn't walk the line. It like jumps back and forth across the line. It's not balancing on the center. It is purposely keeping it like very jarring where you're moving from one side to the other. So you've got this like tongue-in-cheek comedy on one end of the spectrum, and then on the other you have these really gruesome murders that are happening and that are bringing up serious conversations about what it means to have a history of trauma, especially when there was never any justice for that. What does it mean when your ancestors were put through trauma that they never got justice for, that you never got justice for? Can you really just ignore that and move on? I feel like one side can do that and has the luxury of doing that, whereas the other, the side that that trauma actually happened to, that's the sticking point, and that's what we should be caring about, and that's what this book cares about. So at the center of this novel, there's this family, this white Southern family, with the grandma being Granny C. Granny C being based off of Carolyn Bryant, the person that Emmett Till is said to have flirted with, and that's why he was murdered in the terrible way that he was murdered. So she was partially responsible for his murder, but later in her life, she changed her story, and that really shed a lot more light on the situation. So Granny C being based off of her is wondering whether she should say anything, and her family just wants her to sweep it under the rug. They just want her to move forward. They say, like, the past is the past, and there's nothing that you could do now that would change what happened then, without realizing like the repercussions of something like that, especially when clearly people are still upset about it as these murders start to happen. And I think it's especially crazy how like the people that are telling her to continue to lie are people that are younger than her and don't have any stake in the claim anymore. Like, it shouldn't matter to them at all whether or not she says something. I mean, ideally they would want her to say something, but in the grand scheme of things, like, how much is it going to change their specific life versus how much is it going to be a life-changing thing for the community of people that it impacts? So this book is about that. It's about revenge, it's about justice, and it's also just about keeping in mind just how many people were impacted by people that died themselves at the hands of racism. White supremacy is brought up, and Donald Trump is even in this for a bit. It's so jarring actually sometimes how you're reading this and it feels like it's set in the past because of the town setting that it's in. And then all of a sudden it will reference something that is present day and you're like, oh my God, that's right. Like, this is supposed to be happening right now. It's an insane feeling. But I think the point of this book really comes down to this quote here. Everybody talks about genocides around the world, but when the killing is slow and spread over 100 years, no one notices. Where there are no mass graves, no one notices. American outrage is always for show. It has a shelf life. And I think that that's really important to remember because, I mean, we've seen this very recently with George Floyd. It already feels like the tone has entirely shifted from the outrage that there was initially. And how do we continue to have that outrage for all of the people that have been through similar things? And I think that this book is an answer almost to that and calls us to think, what more could we be doing? Because we should still be outraged. Anyways, my overall thoughts is that I thought this book was really great. I think it is one of the strongest on the short list, on the long list as a whole. I think that it is an important read, and the way that it brings together through like this ledger of names so that you can see how much of a genocide that this situation really is. It's a fantastic book. So with that, do the Booker Frog, and I recommend it. I feel like it's pretty obvious, yes. I definitely think that this is a book that you should read, especially if you're in the US, but also if you're outside of it, I still think it is hugely important. Anyways, I hope that you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please do consider subscribing, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.